"Excuse me, there's an issue with your ticket," the airline staff's cold voice rang out, his eyes sweeping over Evelyn as though she didn't belong there. "That's impossible. This is a valid first-class ticket," she replied firmly. Yet, moments later, under the silent gazes of the surrounding passengers, she was forced out of her seat. Evelyn was a young scientist who had just received an international award for innovation in biomedical research. After concluding a highly successful conference in New York, she was eager to return to San Francisco to present at one of the most important conferences of her career. With her neatly tied hair and a sleek dark suit, she stood out not just for her appearance but for the air of confidence that radiated from her. Clutching her first-class ticket, Evelyn approached the security checkpoint. Everything went smoothly until she arrived at the boarding gate. There, Harold Kent, a tall and stern-looking airline employee, was inspecting passengers' tickets. When Evelyn handed over her ticket, Harold cast a scrutinizing glance at her. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" Harold asked, his voice full of suspicion, his gaze scanning her from head to toe. Evelyn frowned slightly, striving to remain calm. "Yes, I'm certain. This is the first-class ticket I booked and paid for." Harold took the ticket, staring at it as if trying to find a flaw. After a few moments he replied, "It seems there's been a mistake. This seat isn't yours. You'll need to leave." Evelyn looked Harold straight in the eye, her tone firm but composed. "There is no mistake. This ticket is mine. My name is right here. I booked it and paid for it in full." But Harold had no intention of backing down. He gestured for another staff member to come over. "Get the manager. I can't let her proceed into this area." Around them, other passengers began to take notice of the exchange. Curious glances mixed with looks of disdain were directed at Evelyn. A few people whispered, while others quietly turned away. Evelyn could feel the shift in the atmosphere, but she stood her ground, her shoulders straight, and her gaze unwavering. "What exactly are you implying?" Evelyn asked, her voice low and sharp. "Is it just because I don't fit your image of a first-class passenger?" Harold smirked slightly, his tone dismissive. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm just following procedure." The flight manager, a woman named Laura Grant, quickly arrived. Laura inspected Evelyn's ticket and confirmed that it was completely valid. But instead of resolving the issue, Laura appeared annoyed at having to intervene. "You can sit down, but don't bother the other passengers," Laura said, clearly eager to end the situation quickly. Evelyn stepped past Harold to make her way to her seat, but the atmosphere in the first-class cabin grew heavy. As she sat down, Evelyn could feel the disdainful glances from some of the passengers around her. A middle-aged man across from her blatantly turned his seat away, while a young woman whispered to her companion. She tried to ignore it, but the feeling of isolation gradually overwhelmed her. Evelyn gazed out the window, her hands clenched tightly together. She knew, however, that staying calm at this moment was of utmost importance. A few minutes later, another airline staff member approached. "Ms. Tran, a passenger has reported that you're sitting in the wrong seat. We'll need to check your ticket again." Evelyn couldn't believe her ears. "This is the third time my ticket has been checked in less than 10 minutes. How far are you willing to go to humiliate me?" The staff member hesitated, visibly uncomfortable but maintaining a stiff demeanor. "We're just following protocol. If you don't comply, we'll have to ask you to leave the plane." Those words were the final straw. Evelyn stood up, her eyes filled with anger, though her voice remained calm. "I have complied with every rule, and I'm not going anywhere. If you want to remove me, do it in front of all the passengers here, and explain why." Evelyn's statement caused the cabin to fall silent. A few passengers began recording the situation with their phones. A young man, Michael Gray, spoke loudly, "Leave her alone. This is clearly discrimination." Harold Kent, feeling the pressure from the crowd's stares, quickly called for airport security. When Evelyn was forced to leave the plane, she walked with her head held high. Though a simmering anger burned inside her, she knew this was more than just a minor incident. It was evidence of a much larger problem, one of injustice and deeply rooted prejudice that she had faced her entire life. She had no idea that the video of this incident would soon go viral and become the focus of public outrage, marking the beginning of a battle she would never back down from. Evelyn Tran stood beside the glass door leading to the tarmac, the airport lights reflecting on her face. Forced to leave the plane without a satisfactory explanation, she felt anger rising in her chest, but Evelyn didn't let it show. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. Near the boarding gate, A group of airport security personnel, led by Daniel Brooks, was waiting. Daniel, with an air of arrogance, looked at Evelyn from afar as if she were a potential threat. Ms. Tran, please come with us to clarify the situation, Daniel said coldly. Evelyn followed Daniel into a small room. The cramped space contained only a wooden table and two chairs facing each other. The stark white walls heightened the oppressive atmosphere. A younger, less experienced female security officer, Rachel Lee, stood next to Daniel. Rachel looked at Evelyn with a hint of sympathy, as though she wanted to say something but didn't dare speak up. Sit down, Daniel said. Motioning as if he were addressing someone guilty of a serious offense, Evelyn didn't sit. She stood tall, her gaze steady. Before you ask me anything, I want to know why I was forced off the plane. My ticket is completely valid. Daniel raised an eyebrow and smirked. We received reports that you were causing a disturbance on the plane. That's why. A disturbance? Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. In what way? For insisting on sitting in the seat I paid for. Or because I don't look like the kind of person you think belongs there. Rachel shifted slightly, as if wanting to intervene, but Daniel cut her off. We're not here to argue. Cooperate, or we'll have to take stronger measures. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Stronger measures? Fine. I just want everything documented, so I'll wait here until you call a higher-level manager. Outside the room, the incident had already attracted the attention of several passengers, including Michael Gray, who had recorded the event on the plane. Michael quickly opened a live stream app on his phone and began broadcasting what was happening. Everyone, look at this, Michael said angrily. They're humiliating a woman just because she's sitting in the seat she paid for. This is discrimination, plain and simple. A group of passengers began gathering around Michael, expressing their agreement. An older man, Mr. Patterson, spoke up. I've flown with this airline for decades, but I've never seen anything this disgraceful. It's shameful. Michael turned to the camera. We can't let this happen. Share this video. Let everyone see what's going on. Meanwhile, inside the room, Daniel was losing patience. He stood up and slammed his hand on the table. You're making this worse, Ms. Tran. I suggest you sit down and answer the questions. Evelyn, remarkably calm, crossed her arms over her chest. Worse? You're threatening me. Is this how you treat a paying passenger with a valid ticket? You have no right to humiliate me like this. Evelyn's words made it impossible for Rachel to stay silent. She took a deep breath and spoke up. Daniel, I think we need to handle this differently. This isn't the way. Be quiet. Rachel, Daniel snapped. You don't understand anything. Rachel lowered her head, but the dissatisfaction on her face was unmistakable. Evelyn noticed it and felt a small glimmer of hope. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Laura Grant, the flight manager, walked in. Laura looked tense, her eyes darting quickly to Daniel before settling on Evelyn. Ms. Tran, Laura began, her voice striving for neutrality. I'm here to resolve this matter reasonably. We want to ensure you're treated with respect, but we also have to ensure the safety of all passengers. Safety, Evelyn interrupted. I haven't done anything to endanger anyone. This isn't about safety, it's about discrimination. I want to know the real reason behind all of this. Laura didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Daniel, who remained rigid, then back at Evelyn. I'll conduct a thorough investigation, but for now we'll arrange another flight for you, and… No, thank you, Evelyn replied firmly. I don't need another flight. I need justice. And I'm not going to let this slide. Evelyn walked out of the room with her head held high, while Michael and other passengers continued recording her every step. Sympathetic yet outraged expressions filled the faces of those watching from outside. Evelyn knew this was only the beginning, but she was determined not to stay silent. Behind her, Laura and Daniel stood in silence, realizing the situation was spiraling out of their control. What they didn't know was that Michael's video had already begun circulating on social media, and public outrage over the injustice was just beginning to build. Evelyn left the airport, her steps heavy. Her head remained high, but the humiliation and anger simmered within her. Outside the taxi pickup area, the city lights cast long shadows as they reflected off her figure into the night. Her phone vibrated incessantly in her hand, dozens of notifications from social media, friends and colleagues who had started seeing Michael Gray's video. Evelyn stopped at a bench near the exit, taking a deep breath before opening her contact list and dialing her father, Benjamin Tran. Dad, she said as his familiar voice came through the line, warm yet firm. Evelyn, are you okay? I just saw a video. Was that you? Benjamin asked, his voice tinged with concern. Evelyn stayed silent for a few seconds before recounting everything. She described every detail from Harold Kent's disdainful attitude to the unsettling silence of the passengers on the plane. When she reached the part where she was forcibly removed from her seat and confronted by security, her voice caught in her throat. "This isn't just about me, Dad," she said. "It's about how they treat people like us, like me, different, not fitting into their idea of who belongs." Benjamin sighed, the anger in his silence palpable between them. "Evelyn, this can't be ignored. Do you have any evidence? Did anyone record what happened?" "Yes, someone did," Evelyn replied. "Michael Gray, he recorded the whole thing, and the video is starting to go viral. I don't know what to do next, but I can't stay silent." Benjamin immediately reached out to one of his former colleagues, Jessica Harper, a renowned civil rights attorney. Within an hour, he had connected Evelyn with Jessica through a video call. Jessica, a sharp and confident young woman, appeared on Evelyn's phone screen and quickly got to the point. "Evelyn, I've seen the video. This isn't just about an isolated incident. This is a case that could change an entire system if we handle it correctly." Evelyn listened as Jessica outlined the next steps: gathering evidence, engaging with the media, and preparing a legal case against the airline. "But I need to know," Jessica said, "are you ready to face public attention? This won't be easy." "Ms. Harper," Evelyn replied, her gaze steely. "I don't want attention, but if that's the cost of exposing the truth, I'm ready." As Evelyn spoke with Jessica, Michael's video surpassed 1 million views. Hashtags like Justice for Evelyn and airline discrimination spread rapidly across Twitter and Instagram, igniting widespread discussion. Some prominent figures in the fields of science and education, who knew Evelyn through international conferences, began speaking out. Dr. Sophia Lin, a leading professor, wrote on Twitter, "Evelyn Tran is one of the brightest young scientists of our generation. This incident is an insult not only to her but to our entire community. Don't let this be forgotten." While Evelyn garnered strong support from the public, Skyline Airways began to face immense pressure from public opinion. At Skyline's headquarters in Chicago, Henry Coleman, the airline's CEO, received a barrage of emails and calls from the PR team. "Mr. Coleman, we need to act immediately," said Laura Harper, head of PR. "This situation is spiraling out of control. We need to issue a public apology." "No," Coleman replied coldly. "If we admit fault, it will set a bad precedent. Find a way to calm the public without exposing us to legal liability." With Jessica's support and the growing public backing, Evelyn prepared for the next step, taking Skyline Airways to court. Benjamin urged his daughter to be careful and focused. "You may feel exhausted," Evelyn, Benjamin said over the phone, "but this fight is bigger than you. It's about proving that injustice cannot go unchallenged." Evelyn nodded, her eyes alight with determination. "I won't back down, Dad. This is the time to act." Sitting in front of her computer in her small apartment, Evelyn felt both exhilarated and nervous. Her online meeting with her legal team, led by Jessica Harper, began with a tense atmosphere. Michael Gray's video had spread widely on social media, and public pressure on Skyline Airways was mounting. Jessica began the meeting with a sharp tone. "Evelyn, we currently have 3 key factors to support our case: Michael's video, eyewitnesses from the plane, and evidence related to Skyline's internal policies. But this is just the beginning. They will push back, and we need to be ready." At Skyline Airways headquarters in Chicago, CEO Henry Coleman convened an emergency meeting with the legal and PR teams. "We're under attack from all sides," Coleman said, slamming his hand on the table. "Laura, I need your team to control the narrative. Issue an apology, but don't admit fault. We can't let this turn into a major lawsuit." Laura Harper, the head of PR, nodded. "We're drafting a press release, but you should know public pressure is mounting. If we don't act quickly, we'll lose control of the situation." In a corner of the room, Margaret Lane, the head of the legal team, spoke calmly. "We need to prepare for the likelihood of a lawsuit. But first, let's find ways to undermine her credibility. Dig into her background, find any weaknesses we can exploit." Meanwhile, Jessica had begun gathering information from witnesses. Several passengers from the flight, including Emma Davis, agreed to testify. Emma, a high school teacher, recounted, "I saw the entire thing. Evelyn just wanted to sit in the seat she paid for, but the airline staff treated her like she was a threat. Jessica urged Evelyn to brace herself for a long battle. Evelyn, they won't play fair. They'll try to make you look like the troublemaker. But you're not alone. We'll fight this together. Unexpectedly, a new factor emerged. Tom Hughes, a Skyline insider, sent an anonymous email to Jessica. In it, he revealed the existence of internal documents indicating that Skyline had an unofficial policy encouraging staff to treat passengers differently if they were deemed inconsistent with the business class image. Jessica immediately reached out to Tom and arranged a secret meeting. At a small cafe on the outskirts of Chicago, Tom, a young man with nervous eyes, handed over a folder of documents. These emails will change everything, Tom said. But I need you to protect my identity. If Skyline finds out I leaked this, I'll lose my job. Jessica reassured him. Tom, what you're doing is incredibly brave. We'll protect you, and we'll use this evidence lawfully. The media quickly picked up the story. Major news outlets like CNN and NBC aired the video and interviewed supporters of Evelyn. On Twitter, the hashtag #JusticeForEvelyn continued to dominate the trends, generating millions of posts. Evelyn received support from all corners, but the pressure was relentless. One morning, she woke up to her phone inundated with messages, most of them supportive, though some were threats from Skyline's loyalists. This isn't going to be easy, she told Benjamin during a phone call. But I won't back down. I can't let this happen to anyone else. Jessica and her team finalized the legal documents and officially filed a lawsuit against Skyline Airways. They sued not only for discrimination but also for physical assault and emotional distress. Before going to bed, Evelyn sat by the window, gazing at the shimmering city lights of San Francisco. She knew this battle wouldn't be short or easy, but deep within her, a fire for justice had been ignited. This is the time, she told herself. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly. The courtroom was packed early in the morning. Evelyn Tran's lawsuit against Skyline Airways had drawn significant attention, not just from the media but from the public, who eagerly followed every development. Outside the courthouse, journalists, photographers, and protesters holding signs demanding justice filled the sidewalks. Evelyn entered the courtroom alongside Jessica Harper, her legal team, and her father, Benjamin Tran. She wore a sleek black suit, her gaze resolute, though a faint trace of unease lingered within her. She knew this trial wasn't just about her quest for justice, it was for everyone who had ever faced discrimination. Presiding over the case was Judge Richard Green, known for his fairness and unyielding demeanor. He entered the courtroom with a composed presence, his sharp gaze scanning the room as if to remind everyone that this was a place of law and truth. All rise, the court clerk announced, and the entire courtroom stood. Jessica Harper, Evelyn's lead attorney, approached the jury box. Her voice was firm, each word resonating with confidence. Your Honor, members of the jury, she began. Today we are here not only to seek justice for Evelyn Tran, but to expose a system that has long allowed discrimination, abuse of power, and injustice to persist. Jessica continued. We will prove that Evelyn was removed from her first-class seat not for any legitimate reason, but because she was deemed unfit. Unfit for what? For the image Skyline Airways believes it must uphold? This is unacceptable. Representing Skyline Airways, Margaret Lane, their lead counsel, responded. Your Honor, members of the jury, this lawsuit is based on a misunderstanding. Our staff acted in accordance with standard safety protocols to maintain order on the flight. This is not about discrimination or injustice. Michael Gray, who recorded the incident on the plane, was the first witness called to testify. He recounted the entire sequence of events, from Evelyn being asked to leave her seat to her eventual removal from the aircraft. When I saw how they treated her, I couldn't believe it, Michael said. She didn't do anything wrong. In fact, she was very polite. But they treated her as if she were a threat just because she didn't fit the image they believed a first-class passenger should have. Jessica played Michael's video for the jury. In it, Evelyn's calm yet resolute voice stood in stark contrast to Harold Kent's rude demeanor and the unsettling silence of the other passengers. The courtroom fell silent as the video ended. The jury and Judge Green exchanged glances, visibly impacted by what they had seen. Next, Emma Davis, a high school teacher seated near Evelyn on the flight, shared her account. She just wanted to sit in the seat she had paid for, Emma said. But the airline staff treated her like she had no right to be there. They never would have done this to another passenger. Margaret Lane attempted to counter by emphasizing that Skyline staff were simply following protocol. But Jessica swiftly rebutted, if this was standard protocol, why weren't the other passengers subjected to repeated ticket checks like Evelyn? Why was she singled out? Jessica then presented internal emails from Skyline Airways, provided by Tom Hughes. These emails revealed that the airline maintained an unofficial policy to preserve the business class image by treating certain passengers differently if they were deemed unsuitable. When these emails were read aloud in court, the room nearly erupted. The jury could clearly see that this was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic pattern of discrimination. Skyline's legal team attempted to shift the narrative by calling Harold Kent to the stand. However, Harold's nervous demeanor and inconsistent answers only made things worse. When asked why he had asked Evelyn to leave her seat, Harold replied, "I didn't think she belonged there. I didn't think she fit." Jessica seized the opportunity. "Thank you, Harold. Your words have said it all." Judge Green adjourned the session, allowing the jury and both parties to prepare for the next day. Evelyn exited the courthouse to cheers from the supportive crowd outside. She looked at her father, Benjamin, and Jessica with gratitude in her eyes. "We're doing it," she said, her voice full of hope. "We're exposing the truth." Jessica nodded. "But the fight isn't over yet, Evelyn. Stay strong." The second day of the trial began with a tense atmosphere. Public attention had grown significantly after the revelations on the first day, especially regarding Skyline Airways' internal emails. On social media, justice for Evelyn continued to trend, garnering support from around the world. Evelyn entered the courtroom with a determined expression. She knew today would be the day Skyline Airways unleashed its strongest counter-arguments, and she braced herself for whatever might come. Skyline's legal team opened the day by calling a new witness, Laura Grant, the flight manager on the night of the incident. Laura entered wearing a gray suit, her face impassive. Margaret Lane, Skyline's lead attorney, began. "Ms. Grant, can you describe the events of that evening, specifically Ms. Tran's behavior?" Laura responded in a stiff tone. "She didn't comply with our instructions. When staff asked her to move to resolve a ticketing issue, she was uncooperative and caused a disruption for other passengers." Jessica Harper wasted no time standing to counter. "Ms. Grant, isn't it true that you personally confirmed Ms. Tran's ticket was valid on the spot?" Laura hesitated. "Yes, but the situation at the time was quite tense." Jessica pressed. "Tense because Ms. Tran was asserting her rightful claim to her seat, or tense because the airline staff's mishandling escalated the situation beyond control?" Laura fell silent, offering no response. Jessica then called Evelyn to the stand as the next witness. The courtroom fell silent as Evelyn took the stand. She sat down, her hands clasped tightly together, but her gaze unwavering. "Ms. Tran," Jessica began, "what did you experience that night?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "I did everything a passenger is supposed to do. I booked my ticket, paid for it, and arrived on time, but I was treated like someone who didn't belong. They not only checked my ticket multiple times, but forcibly removed me from my seat. That wasn't a mistake. That was an insult." Jessica continued, "Do you believe what happened to you had anything to do with your appearance or background?" Evelyn paused, then looked directly at the jury. "I can't help but think so. If I had been someone else, maybe it would have been different." Skyline's legal team attempted to rebut by questioning Evelyn's emotions, implying that she had overreacted. But Evelyn calmly responded, "This isn't just about me. It's about how a system treats people it deems unfit, and that's wrong." Jessica continued to wield Skyline Airways' internal emails as a key weapon. One email from Harold Kent, the airline employee who had removed Evelyn from her seat, was read aloud. "We need to ensure the first-class customer image is preserved. Certain inappropriate cases must be handled delicately." The courtroom fell silent. The jury was visibly shocked. Jessica turned to Judge Green. "Your Honor, this was not an isolated incident. This is policy, and it must end." Sensing the case shifting in Evelyn's favor, Margaret Lane tried to salvage the situation by proposing a settlement out of court. But Jessica refused. "We're not just seeking an apology or compensation. We're seeking change." Skyline issued a public apology, but it wasn't enough to quell the public's outrage. Meanwhile, Tom Hughes, the internal whistleblower, continued providing additional documents, including reports of similar past incidents, further strengthening Jessica's arguments. After a long day, Judge Green announced that the trial would conclude the next day with closing arguments. Evelyn felt a temporary sense of relief, but she knew this was just the first step toward a larger victory. Outside the courthouse, the crowd greeted her with cheers. Evelyn turned to Jessica and her father, Benjamin, speaking with determination. "We've come too far to stop now. I won't back down." The atmosphere in the courtroom was more tense than ever. It was the final day of the trial, and everyone understood that the impending verdict would be historic not just for Evelyn, but for the airline industry as a whole. Outside, the crowd had swelled, with signs reading "Justice for Evelyn" and "Don't stay silent against injustice" filling the sidewalks. Evelyn sat next to Jessica Harper, her father Benjamin offering silent but steady support from the row behind her. She looked around the courtroom at the jury, Judge Richard Green, and Skyline Airways' legal team. Everyone was prepared for the final battle. Jessica rose, her confident gaze directed at the jury. "Your Honor, members of the jury, today we're not just talking about Evelyn Tran. We're addressing a system that has allowed discrimination, injustice, and abuse of power to thrive in an industry that should serve everyone. Look at Evelyn. She's a scientist, a strong woman, someone who has done everything to earn the position she holds today. Yet in just a few minutes aboard a Skyline Airways flight, she was disrespected and removed from her rightful seat. And why? Because, in Skyline's eyes, she didn't fit the image they thought was worthy of first class. This isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. If we allow this to continue, who will be the next person pushed out of their seat? Members of the jury, this is your chance to say that we will not tolerate injustice. Evelyn is not just fighting for herself, but for everyone who has been treated unfairly without the opportunity to stand up like she has." Jessica paused, her gaze full of emotion. "Today, you have the chance not just to deliver a verdict, but to change a system. I urge you to stand on the side of justice." Margaret Lane stood, attempting to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, members of the jury, we do not deny that an unfortunate incident occurred on that flight. However, this was not an act of discrimination. It was a misunderstanding, a procedural error that we have quickly addressed." Skyline Airways is an airline committed to serving all its passengers, regardless of background or race. While Evelyn Tran was treated unfairly, this does not prove there is systemic discrimination within our organization. We ask you to look at the broader picture. This is not a lawsuit about the system, but an isolated incident that has been blown out of proportion by the media and public opinion. Despite Margaret's attempt to pivot, the lack of empathy in her argument left many in the courtroom unconvinced. The jury exited the room to deliberate in an atmosphere thick with tension. Evelyn sat quietly, her hands clenched tightly, her eyes fixed ahead. Jessica gently patted her shoulder and whispered, "We've done everything we could." More than 3 hours passed before the jury returned. The tension in the courtroom was so palpable that it felt like everyone was holding their breath. Judge Richard Green asked the jury's foreperson to rise and deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, find the defendant, Skyline Airways, guilty of discriminatory practices against the plaintiff, Evelyn Tran. We conclude that this behavior violated Ms. Tran's civil rights and caused severe emotional harm." The courtroom erupted. Evelyn felt a wave of emotion surge through her chest. She turned to Jessica, her eyes filled with gratitude. Judge Green continued with the sentencing. Skyline Airways is ordered to pay $3 million in damages for emotional distress and $2 million for legal fees. Additionally, Skyline is mandated to implement comprehensive internal reforms, including mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees and third-party oversight for 3 years. As for employee Harold Kent, the judge added, he will be subject to further investigation for abuse of authority. If necessary, criminal charges will be pursued. Then Evelyn exited the courtroom surrounded by family, friends, and supporters. The crowd outside greeted her like a hero. In a brief interview with the press, Evelyn said, "This is not just my victory. This is a victory for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly. We've proven that justice can prevail, and I hope this marks a significant step toward meaningful change." The gentle morning light streamed into Evelyn Tran's small apartment. She sat at her desk, gazing at a stack of papers bearing the logo of the organization she had just founded, Fair Access Initiative. This was her first step in turning her personal victory into a broader social movement. After the verdict, Skyline Airways faced severe repercussions. Their stock dropped by 12%, and a flood of exposes revealed outdated internal policies and similar past incidents. Skyline's CEO Henry Coleman was forced to resign under pressure from shareholders and public outrage. In compliance with the court ruling, Skyline began implementing reforms. Anti-discrimination training programs were rolled out nationwide, and the company hired an independent auditing firm to oversee the changes. Evelyn received an unexpected invitation from Skyline's new leadership to serve as an advisor in restructuring the company's corporate culture. After a few days of consideration, she responded tactfully. "I appreciate your efforts, but I can do better work from the outside, where I can maintain objectivity. I hope you commit to meaningful change not just because of this lawsuit, but because of your responsibility to society." Evelyn and her team at the Fair Access Initiative focused on raising awareness about consumer rights in the service industry. The organization provided legal assistance to victims of discrimination and held workshops on human rights and equitable service practices. At a launch event, Evelyn stood before a crowd of over 500 people in San Francisco. Her voice rang out with conviction. "My victory against Skyline Airways wasn't the end. It was the beginning. We can't change everything with a single lawsuit, but every step forward matters. Today we commit to ensuring that no one is humiliated or dismissed simply because they don't fit someone else's prejudiced expectations." Her statement was met with thunderous applause. Support for Evelyn continued to grow. On social media, the hashtag #JusticeForEvelyn became a symbol of the anti-discrimination movement. Thousands shared their own stories of unfair treatment, expressing gratitude to Evelyn for standing up and representing them. A heartfelt letter from a young girl named Sophia Nguyen brought Evelyn to tears. "Dear MS. Evelyn, I used to think I had no worth because I didn't look like everyone else. But your story showed me that I don't have to change to fit the world needs to change to fit everyone. I hope that one day I can stand beside you in this fight." It wasn't just Skyline Airways that faced scrutiny. Many other airlines began reviewing their policies. Major carriers like Pacific Air and Global Wings publicly committed to corporate culture reforms and investments in employee training. The U.S. Department of Transportation announced new regulations requiring all airlines to include anti-discrimination programs as a mandatory part of their employee training. Evelyn, along with her father Benjamin Tran and Jessica Harper, planned to expand the Fair Access Initiative. Jessica proposed opening additional branches in New York and Chicago and collaborating with other nonprofit organizations to create a broader support network. Benjamin, with his experience as a veteran investigative journalist, suggested organizing an international conference on equity in the service industry. This event would bring together experts, activists, and victims to share stories and solutions. And Evelyn agreed, knowing it was the next step in pushing for meaningful change. One evening, Evelyn sat by her apartment window, gazing at the city lights shimmering in the distance. She reflected on the journey from the day she was removed from her seat on that flight to this moment. It had been a long and challenging road, but she had no regrets. Justice never comes easily, she thought, but it's worth every second of the fight. Benjamin entered the room, carrying 2 cups of tea. He set one down in front of Evelyn and smiled. "You've done something incredible, Evelyn. But there's still so much more to do." Evelyn nodded, lifting her cup. "For those without a voice and for a fairer world," she said. They clinked their cups together, their eyes filled with determination as they looked toward the future.